I am Heath Lloyd, the Assistant City Manager. I have a wonderful team here that we're going to introduce, but I really want to kind of set the stage and certainly give our aldermen an opportunity to talk about the value of this project. But I can't help but take the opportunity just to talk about why we're here. Now, Casey Canal, Phase 2 and Phase 2A, we've been talking about for quite some time. Tonight, what we're here to do is to really look at that from a fresh perspective. And I want to be careful here because it doesn't mean that we're scrapping the old. What it means is that we're taking advantage of today's technologies to look at this project in a different way. And that different way, we believe, is going to be less intrusive. We believe it's going to be better. And most importantly, we believe that this is the technology and the way to address a lot of the flooding that you have. When we go to the maps, we're going to point out to some purple areas. High level, that means they flood all the time, right? And what you're going to see is there's a lot of overlap there. So if everyone would just give us the opportunity to just kind of go over high level, explain why we think this technology is the right time and the right place and really going to address all the challenges. That's what we're here to do tonight. And so again, this is not to get rid of any of the conversations for Casey. This is to really take advantage of technology and use it to benefit our citizens, specifically focused on drainage, which we all know is a challenge in a coastal city. And so just as I set the stage, I do want to ask Alderman Palumbo to come up and really just kind of open it up and say a few words about this project. He has some knowledge of it. We have had a few conversations about how technology has improved and why it's important for us. Alderman Nick Palumbo.
Come on. Yo, give it up for Heath Lloyd. Come on. Now I get to get up here and take all the credit and talk about all the great things that these guys are doing, but I really wanted to take a moment to recognize Mr. Heath Lloyd because what I want you to walk away from this project understanding today is have the same level of confidence in it that I do, that it's going to get done, be done well, be done efficiently, when minimizing neighborhood disturbance at the same time. I'd like to really congratulate Mr. Lloyd and his team. He's our assistant city manager, but many people don't know that Heath actually came up through the ranks in our city government. A Clemson graduate and an engineer, came up through water services, and I believe has spent nearly 20 years with us here at Team Savannah. And I want you to know that because that's what gives me confidence in this product and what you're about to see today. So really, Heath, thank you so much. Thank you. Come on, give it up for Heath. Come on. What you're seeing really is the culmination of about 20 years of engineering effort, collecting funds, and how we're going to improve our neighborhoods together. I see we're joined here by my predecessor, Alderman Julian Miller is here with us. Thank you, Julian, for coming on down. And understanding that this is something we must tackle together. It's not pretty and it's not easy. Retrofitting stormwater work can be very painstakingly difficult, but it's important and it matters. Everything that you see on the slides that we have here today shown in purple are modeled in the 100-year flood plan. What's going to shock you is how often that 100-year flood happens. Mother Nature has been kind enough to remind us, especially in Midtown, how frequent these storms occur. And what's lovely about our neighborhoods is the age and the architecture and the feeling of something that belonged here before us, but they didn't quite build the stormwater the way that we really want them to today. We're going to fix that challenge right now. This effort has been underway collecting dollars since SPLOST 4. Just for reference point, we are on SPLOST 8 right now. So this has been collecting dollars for about 20 years. And these are shovel-ready projects. There are portions that we're going to talk about where we'll seek out into the future, but for phases 2.1 and 2.2, those are fully funded projects that are ready to get underway right now, and we're super excited to share them with you. If you live in Midtown and you see at many of the intersections, you'll see sawhorses strapped to many of the power poles that are out there. The orange and yellow signs that neighbors are kind enough to take down in major tropical events, or even some of the storm systems like we had just a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully, one day when this is said and done, we'll be able to ceremoniously take those down and get rid of them forever. I'm so excited to share with you the plans that we have and the engineering techniques that we're going to deploy to make sure that we can do this efficiently and minimize the neighborhood disturbance as much as possible. Before I pass this over to Mr. Zach Hoffman and introduce him, I would like to recognize our two neighborhood associations who are so strong in showing support that they partnered with us on this event. First up, we have Mr. Matthew Hallett, president of the Habersham Village Neighborhood Association, is here with us, an all-volunteer organization. If you live from 55th Lane to Duran Avenue, Bull Street to Waters Avenue, they have a sign up back where you can sign up and join as a member. So Matthew, give everybody a wave right there. Thank you, Matthew. And we've also partnered with the Ardsley Park and Chatham Crescent Neighborhood Association, an all-volunteer organization representing Victory Drive to 55th Lane. This is going to be impacting both of them, and we are super proud to be partnering with these groups to bring this project forward. Now, I've rattled on a little too much, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Mr. Zach Hoffman, who I believe at a council presentation. Whoa.
Yeah, I want to introduce part of the team before we get to Zach, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes, we have a new addition to Team Savannah that's up ahead.
You want to do it or you want to
We have a new addition. He's standing in the back. Don't be shy. Mr. Ron Felder is here, our Water Services Director, brand new to Team Savannah here. Ron served as the city manager of Garden City, and we recruited him over to Team Savannah, and especially to help implement projects just like this one. So Ron, thank you so much, and thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Mr. Zach Hoffman, also a Clemson grad. Do they just teach you guys stormwater treatment? Zach has spent 10 years at Team Savannah as our, I believe, Director of Stormwater Management, and really has a profound understanding of this subterranean world that exists right underneath our feet. From a city that's nearly 300 years old, there's a lot of infrastructure that's happening in the background. And Zach knows this entire network like the back of his hand. And I encourage you to try to stump him about some of the intersections that are out there, because it's quite impressive, the body of knowledge that he has. So, Zach, please, I'd like to introduce you and take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
All right, so Zach Hoffman, City of Savannah Stormwater Management Director, and I also want to recognize Jan Fay, who helped pull the presentation together. You see her information there. She can be reached directly to get further information or details on this. Jan is our capital projects manager for stormwater. And I also want to introduce Stephen O'Connell here, who's with us today with Black and Veatch. They are going to go into some of the details of this kind of innovative technology, these deep tunnel bores that you know, they're the experts. So wanted to have them involved, and also with him is Jonathan Ladd from Black and Veatch as well. So if you stump me, I will be passing to them. So we'll get started. So, as Alderman Palumbo mentioned, this project, you know, has been 20 years in the works, and there's a lot of history there. When I came on 10 years ago, this project was in the works. In the general sense, I guess, we were trying to put together a final design on a run of this project along 63rd Street, basically running Habersham Village, 63rd down to Paulson, turning north on Paulson, and then out on 60th Street, I think, to the Casey Canal. That project was...
I apologize for interrupting you. They're saying they can't hear you online.
Okay.
So you probably have to stay close to the
Get a little closer?
I think
Okay.
we're doing like a little bit online, so y'all be patient with us as well. Yeah, stay close to the
Okay.
microphone, please.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So this is going back to 10 years ago, 63rd Street project. And we put that out for bid, and there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of impact to the residents, you know, it's deep excavations, and that bid came back extremely over our budget, just out of control. So we had to go back to the drawing board. And so we did that and started putting together another plan, taking a little bit smaller bites at the apple, looking at covering a larger area of drainage like is shown kind of on these maps here. But that project was coming together around 2020, and we got it out to the residents. We talked with individuals. We did some surveys through certain streets. and we got a lot of feedback from the public saying, you know, there was a concern that Columbus Avenue was the main corridor of this new route, and I think I can go to the next. It's the route here in red, was going to be our first phase, and we're all familiar with Columbus Avenue and the beautiful treescape, tree lawn median there. There was a lot of concern: are we going to have to take these trees? You know, there's a lot of nice live oaks down Columbus Avenue, and so we tried to come up with construction methods that would prevent impacts to those trees. There was not a good certainty there. We had concerns. So we decided we had to go back to the drawing board again. And basically what we did was came up with the layout that you now see on these drawings that I'm hoping after this presentation we can more break out and do kind of one-on-one and answer questions more personal level there. But what we're doing here is actually providing better drainage improvements across a larger area with what we think is a much more cost-effective approach. We're focused on making the improvements where the drainage issues are occurring. So before, we were running down Columbus Avenue trying to get the water basically from Habersham Village to the Casey Canal, Truman Parkway. And the problem with that is there's pretty much a ridge line that runs northeast through this area. And then other than that, everyone's familiar with Bull Street corridor, which rises up significantly from Habersham Village area. So what you're left with is this bowl here, and the water that sets in this bowl during high rain events can't make its way through the small infrastructure of pipes we have that gets it over here to the Truman Parkway and Casey Canal. So what we do have to our advantage is the Casey Phase 1 project, which was large box culvert infrastructure that was put down Harmon Street, and then running out 56th Street to the Casey Canal. That made drastic improvements to those areas north, and was built with extra capacity actually on those lines. So what we're able to do here is, again, focus on these areas in purple, which is where our modeled flooding is occurring. Take the 54th Street run of pipe, tie it into the Harmon box, and then our next phase is 56th and 57th Street, where we'll be able to take that and also tie into the Harmon box there at 56th and Harmon, and provide 100-year conveyance to the Casey Canal. So effectively, those two phases will remove this flooded shaded areas out of the 100-year modeled event. After that, our third phase that we've broken this out into now is what really we were originally with the 63rd Street project, and the project that was presented a few years ago was focused on Habersham Village. And you can see that, and I'm sure probably everyone in here is very familiar with driving up and down Abercorn after a big rainfall event and the flooding that occurs, and this modeled shaded purple area here really shows that. So with this area, the problem is, again, we don't have a conduit to get us from the low point, Habersham Village, to the Casey Canal. So the only way to do that is to without being very destructive through the neighborhood, to Columbus Drive, the tree lawns, the canopy, we looked at this technique that's being used in Charleston. It's been used in Houston. It's been used around the world. It's a deep tunnel bore. And so with this technology, what we've determined is we can take a deep tunnel, go vertically 100 plus feet, get below the marl, which is a geologic strata under us here, turn horizontal and pop back up vertically at the Casey Canal. And basically that entire section of conduit would be at an elevation 130 feet below ground, providing no impacts to the above ground surface residents or commercial facilities. And I'll go on to the next slide. We're gonna, and the guys with Black and Veatch can get into much more detail, nerd out on that than I can. So we'll let them get to that point. But so just reiterating what I'm talking about is here's an example of some photos of just your open cut, typical conventional construction of storm drainage pipe. Your excavator in the street, narrow streets in this example, working between the curb line, but shallow excavation, 10 foot or less excavation, trench box, you're able to set the pipe in there. The problem is once you get above or deeper than about 14 foot, 12 foot excavation, you're having to put in sheet pile shoring. And that's the problem we run into with what has taken us so long on this project to get to where we are. Because we know what happened in Casey Phase 1. It was a lot of sheet pile, it was a lot of deep excavation, and there was issues with it. And anyone that was around then knows that very well probably. It was before my time, but I've heard all the stories. So we know that's not acceptable. We know we're getting away from that. And so as long as we can do this type of conventional construction where the pipe depth's no more than about 10 to 12 feet, we want to do this, and it's very acceptable. Doesn't cause those impacts, doesn't cause the vibration of driving the sheet pile, and will continue to work. Now in areas that we plan to use on this project, where we can have essentially 3 pipe diameters cover above the pipe, so essentially you're getting deeper into the ground under the roadway, we can use a technique referred to as micro tunneling. But typically you need 3 pipe diameters of cover above that operation so that you don't have collapse. But that's essentially anywhere from a 20 to 110 inch pipe that is actually bored and jacked into the ground as that tunnel boring rig is proceeding forward. And that may be a technique we're still trying to look at it to try to do on the far east end of the 54th Street phase, which you can see labeled on these maps. So the other technique we're talking about is deep tunnel boring. And again, this is something Charleston has used all across the peninsula of Charleston to move and convey water, storm drainage, as well as sanitary sewer actually. And it's amazing technology that's able to be used, and you know, the surface impacts is not even minimal. There's no surface impacts other than the entry and exit points of the shaft. So with that, we can go up to a 10, 12 foot diameter tunnel. Oh, he's telling me I got to speak louder. Wow. All right.
I apologize, everybody. We're getting a lot of concerns online. They can't hear you.
Pull your mic up a little.
This mic or?
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry, Zach. I do apologize.
All right, well, I'm about to my portion where I'm going to pass it over to Black and Veatch. So Stephen, make sure you're talking real close into the mic. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Stephen so that he can go into this a little bit more detail, because to me, that's what's really important about tonight is understanding this non-conventional really technology we're using here, which is this deep tunnel bore. So I want him to take a chance to go into that.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Is this loud enough? Good? Okay. And so just a bit about myself and Black and Veatch. So I serve as the East Coast Tunnel Practice Lead for Black and Veatch. I've done design and construction of tunnels in Charleston, Atlanta, Greenville, up to Toronto, down to Puerto Rico, and down to South America, actually a project in Chile. So very familiar with the technology of tunneling. Happy to be able to speak on it tonight. I'm based out of Charleston, South Carolina. With us is Jonathan Ladd. He's our senior project manager. He's everything related to water. So I'm focused on the underground, anything above the underground, what I call underground, which is tunneling. So Jonathan's a hydraulics guy. He knows pump stations, anything conveyance-wise. Jonathan can help answer. But what was mentioned, Mr. Lloyd mentioned innovation. So that's one of the things I wanted to say is that we've got some really good innovation that's happening in the tunneling world in the last 15 to 20 years where it really makes it an applicable tool to utilize for stormwater conveyance. So I want to talk to that now. So that's kind of the why of tunneling. So just in general is what you can see here is a typical system is, and I'll go over this more in a future slide, but the stormwater enters the tunnel through these drop shafts, enters the larger horizontal tunnel, and then pops back up at the discharge point. And this project would be the Casey 2-way canal. This photo down here, this is of Charleston. So this is a 15-foot diameter tunnel, probably a little larger than would be needed here, but right in that range. So the sweet spot for tunneling and innovation of tunneling is about that 10-foot to 15-foot diameter. That's where you're getting the most kind of bang for your buck. A lot of tunnel boring machines that are on the market to be used for your project. Here what you're seeing is what we call ribs and lagging. So you can kind of see these steel ribs and wooden lagging. It's, in my mind, you think about a wine barrel on its side. You have those steel ribs, and in between are those wooden lagging. That's the temporary support. What you'll see at the end of the day in a future photo is this is then lined with concrete. So that's your final structure at the end of the day. The benefit here of tunneling is you're underground. You're below all the infrastructure. You're below all the piled foundations you might have. You're not disrupting the public. You have access points into the tunnel. So you have your access point where you lower your tunnel boring machine. You have your access point where the tunnel boring machine comes out of the ground. But in between those locations, there's no disruption to the public. You don't even know they're down there. There's no vibrations. There's no noise. We're just happily tunneling away in the ground, and everyone above is going about their daily business. So that's kind of why tunneling. But this, and what I want to show here is, this is a typical stormwater tunnel system. They vary, but this one I wanted to go through the components, and this is Charleston Peninsula. What you're seeing here is in orange would be the area that floods. So very similar to what's shown here on purple. What's shown here in orange is the 100-year, not the 100-year, this is more the 10-year event in Charleston, which is amazing to say, but Charleston has less elevation gain than Savannah, which is absolutely incredible because I don't think there's a lot here either. But very similar conditions. You have the river systems that you discharge here in Charleston to versus the canal, but the actual system is very similar. So what you're seeing here is about a 550-acre area that would be served by this tunnel system. So the rainwater falls, piles up on the roads. It enters this near-surface system. So you still have a near-surface system that connects to the low points in your neighborhoods. Those near-surface systems then hit a drop shaft, drop into the tunnel, and then go horizontal to, in this case, a pump station that pumps it out into the river. Or in the case of the canal, it's fed by gravity and would come out and discharge right into the canal system. So you have your near-surface collection, into the drop shaft, into the tunnel, and then into an outfall structure into your water body. So this is a typical stormwater system. Here in Charleston, it's only servicing a 10-year storm event, much smaller, but again, you have a lot less elevation change between the center of Charleston and the outfall into the river there. So this is a typical access shaft location. So I mentioned the 2 points. You have the one that's at the start of the tunnel system and the one at the end of the tunnel system. What you're seeing here is a vertical shot of a very typical access shaft. Here's the shaft that goes down. So this one in Charleston, this is Harmon Field. But to give you a perspective on how close they can construct to residential structures, commercial structures, schools, this is the baseball field that was left in full operation. They still maintain playing baseball games. We put our fence limits, I think, at about 350 feet. No balls ever came over into the site, so just far enough that no one could hit it there. And then right across the street is a high school, so Burke High School in Charleston. So very condensed area And the site footprint here is about 0.75 acres. So to just give some perspective, what we look for in an access shaft site is between 0.5 acres and 2 acres. Somewhere in there is kind of the sweet spot for having enough room to put in your tunnel boring machine, store all your materials that would build the tunnel, have enough storage for the contractor to have their tools and equipment, and have a mucking operation. So just to kind of show you here, this is the trailers, so this is where the contractor and the engineer would sit during construction. Here's kind of storage for the contractor, all their tools and equipment, and then this is the materials. So I mentioned the steel ribs and the wooden lagging. That's what you're seeing here. So it's stored on site as they need it. The crane would pick it up, lower it down in the shaft. A train then takes it up the tunnel and puts it in place as they're mining and advancing forward. This is the excavated material. So in Charleston, we also have marl, one of the similar type of ground material. We have about 50 feet of what we call superficial soil or overburden, really not great engineering material. And then once you get below that 50 feet, you're in the Cooper marl. It's very similar to what we're seeing here in Savannah. And we actually have some geotechnical investigations ongoing right now to try and characterize the behavior of the ground. And this here is a 30-foot diameter shaft. So that is, at the end of the day, and I'll show some pictures, all you're going to see at this site, even though this is 0.75 acres, is at the end of the day, you just see a shaft lid that's at the surface, and the rest is all restored and back to what it looked like before construction started. So now onto the shafts. So this is looking down. This is a caisson construction for a shaft, and that's what you're seeing here in the upper left. So one of the things that Zach mentioned was on the deep open cut sections, you would have to put sheet piling in. We typically want to avoid sheet piling if we can. We're showing it here. It is a way to construct some shafts, and we've done that before. But where possible, we use the caisson method, which doesn't have vibrations. So the caisson method, you're constructing concrete at the surface, a ring of concrete, you're digging out the center, and then this caisson's sinking under its own weight. So you kind of keep digging out, it keeps sinking, keep digging out, it's sinking. So what you're seeing always at the surface is like a 20-foot piece of concrete, and that just keeps sinking and you keep building it up. But the benefit there is there's no vibrations, so there's no driving of sheet pilings. So it's less intrusive, less destruction, as we could say, to the nearby, and disturbances to the nearby public. When you're constructing these shafts, we do monitor for vibrations, though. We monitor for site conditions to ensure that it's not causing any damage or any issues, but it's less invasive for sure. Some of the other methods are secant piles or slurry walls. These are typically done when you're dealing with needing to get through soil and into hard rock. We don't have hard rock here, so we do, but it's not in the zone of where we're going to be. So we're planning on being all in soil, which means we'd probably be focusing on either the caisson method or the sheet piling method. So both of these is what we envision, is driving those down, socketing them, or getting them to sink into the marl formation, and creating that watertight seal, so you're not having any ground or groundwater flowing into your shaft. So that helps stabilize the ground for a safe excavation. So went from the overall shaft footprint to how we construct the shaft. Now we picked some specific sites in Charleston that kind of show the construction before and after of a shaft site location for a tunnel system. So if anyone's familiar, this is Colonial Lake. So this is in downtown Charleston. What you're seeing is before construction and then after. And what we like to say is you don't really know we were ever there. All you're seeing from an infrastructure standpoint is some shaft access hatches that are at grade so that they can get in and access and maintain the tunnel as needed. And what you're also seeing is betterments. So what typically happens is when you're going to redo a shaft, you make sure that you're putting it back in a better condition than when you first got it. This is in a very historic area, Charleston, very similar to areas of Savannah that we'd be dealing with. You can see the residential houses right across the street from the shaft site, which is right in this vicinity here. So it just gives you a good perspective. What it also shows, though, is how close you are to a water body. So Colonial Lake is an inland lake in the interior of the peninsula, but the shaft construction techniques were such that you didn't impact the water levels at all because you used those watertight structures going down into the Cooper Marl. Likewise, this is another one. So if anyone's familiar with Rainbow Row in Charleston or the Battery Wall, this is right near the Battery Wall in Rainbow Row. This is Water Street. And again, what you're seeing is a before construction and then after. So we were right up against this very old historic house with the shaft location. And this one particularly was for a wastewater tunnel. Very similar construction means and methods. And just happy to show that before construction and after construction, the only difference you're seeing is some access hatches in the middle of the street. But overall, no impacts to the residential community. You're not having to rip down trees. I mean, you can see the same trees that were here before are also here afterwards. So trees remain in place, the infrastructure, all the beautiful sidewalk and paving remains in place. So you're very limiting the impacts to the public with these shaft sites. So going from the near surface down the shaft, now we're into the tunnel. What we're showing here is how we would actually excavate that horizontal tunnel. So this is a tunnel boring machine that was used in Charleston. Each tunnel boring machine gets a name before it goes in the ground. This one, I can't actually remember the name, but typically it's after one of the construction workers, or they name it. It's all for good luck with the mining. But this was a 15-foot diameter machine, and what you're seeing is the face of the machine. So this is the rotating cutter head. So the face of the machine rotates. It excavates the ground. It comes out the back side of the TBM. TBM's for tunnel boring machine. It gets dumped onto some trains, and then those trains, which you can see here, train tracks, bring it out to the shaft. All that material comes out of the shaft, and then it gets hauled off via dump trucks, like you typically would do on a construction site. While this machine is mining, it pushes forward in 5-foot increments. So every 5 feet, they install a steel rib and then this wooden lagging in between. We think it'd be very similar in Savannah as far as the means and methods. So they would use a tunnel boring machine that's a soft ground machine. You install these ribs and lagging as temporary support to hold the ground open, ensure that the workers are safe, and then at the end of the day, you pour it back with concrete. So this is the same exact tunnel stretch, temporary support, and then the final lining of concrete. Here we've got a foot thick lining of concrete, and it's built to last for decades underground. 15-foot excavated diameter and a 12-foot finished diameter tunnel in this case. The benefits were mentioned. You don't have to disrupt the public as much. You don't have to take down any trees. The vibrations aren't there because you're below the surface. And what you're seeing here is kind of typical underground easements. What this is trying to convey is the tunnel is 100 to 120 feet below ground surface. So well below any piled foundations for even large, like parking garages. We've in some cases gone under large buildings in Charleston where you underneath their foundations, so you're not impacting the foundations, you're not impacting future development, you're below the grade and basically unseen at grade. One of the kind of benefits of tunneling is we don't typically get to present on it because no one really knows what we're doing. It's kind of sight unseen, so it's kind of nice to talk to people about what actually is going on underground. But this just gives you a good feel for there's no disruption. And typically what we do is we stay in existing rights of way and easements, so we're not crossing under any properties unless absolutely required. And so with that, I was going to hand it back over to Zach and I'm happy to stick around later and answer any questions. Just happy to be here and talk to you guys about tunneling.
So real quick to kind of wrap up before we can break out and look at the maps one-on-one, and I do want to make one other point before I wrap up. But so right here, we wanted to show real quick where our entry and exit vertical shafts were being planned to be located. And you can see here in the aerial, that's Jacob G. Smith School, and the 5-spot basically there along Habersham. So we've looked at that location as being a solid potential for this vertical shaft. It's also the low point of this general drainage area. So we would have good positive drainage from any ancillary pipes that would be bringing the drainage to the vertical shaft. That area, as well as the parking lot, of course, there at Habersham Village, which of course would be probably a bigger impact.
Are y'all coordinating that entrance to Bakery Smith with the future improvements that they're gonna have planned for the school?
We understand, we have reached out to them. We understand that they are planning those improvements, and we are trying to coordinate that effort. But that's essentially where we're at this time. That we need to coordinate with Memorial Hospital on just identifying and establishing that exit shaft. And then you'd essentially have a large box culvert or bridge over the frontage road there before it discharged into the Casey Canal. Is that, let's see, okay. And so some references there that we're going to be provided just for more information on the deep tunnel methods. But I do want to go back because I was thinking, and there's some case studies we could go through, but going back, I want to get on a breakout, we could look at it, but I know everybody wants to know schedule, and that's something I didn't really mention before. So in regards to schedule, right now, the phase 2-1 from Reynolds to Atlantic, there's a section there of currently compromised storm drainage pipe. We found, identified recently, and instead of replacing that smaller 18-inch pipe with replacement 18-inch pipe, we know this project's in the works. We're going to go ahead and do a replacement on that block with 60-inch reinforced concrete pipe, and that should be beginning in the next October, basically. We should see construction beginning at that block. And as we wrap up the design on the rest of the phase 2-1, we should basically roll right in to beginning construction on that entire segment from Bull Street all the way to tying into Harmon. And that entire section design will be wrapping up, as well as the 56th and 57th. And my goal is that next year, it's hard to say, we have not put this out for bid just yet, but construction schedule, we should be completing phase 2-1 into next year, first of the following. And then moving straight into phase 2-2. So my goal is in the next 2 years, we would have phase 2-1 and 2-2 well underway of construction, if not getting close to wrapping up. And as Alderman Palumbo mentioned, those are fully funded projects ready to go. As far as phase 2-3B, A and B, which includes the deep tunnel bore. Those, we have to get further in design on those. We're well underway, but we are not as far along as we are on phase 2-1 and 2-2. So we want to move forward with them. And while we also are trying to generate additional funding that's going to be necessary for the third phase. So I wanted to mention that as far as schedule.
And then for 2-1 and 2-2, is that a traditional open cut, the 10-foot depth I think you mentioned earlier?
Yes, sir.
Right, so basically you're gonna block that section of the street off while you're doing that construction?
Correct. It'll be basically a block at a time, but a moving operation where it's being open cut, pipe installed, backfilling, gravel, likely won't be asphalt right away put back, but it'll be gravel to where residents can access their driveways and get to their particular residence. Now there will be potentially, as that moving operation's coming through that block, a week possibly that residents may be impacted where they can't make it to their driveway. And we understand that, and it's in the past we've dealt with this on other projects Baldwin Park, Gwinnett Wheaton Culver projects, where we have to just coordinate and work with those residents to accommodate as best as we can.
But there's no structural impacts you feel from the 10-foot depth?
There should be no structural impacts. It's standard construction excavation. Not to say that a machine working doesn't cause a little bit of movement from that machine, but this is not driving sheet pile and causing those type of impacts.
What's the deciding factor in that last section being microtunnel or not?
So the last section on 54th, right here, we are getting our final design together. The invert of the pipe is higher than we predicted, and we had to finalize that to be able to do the section in the middle between Reynolds and Atlantic. And so our thought was we would be microtunneling originally. We had the depth to do that, and we didn't want to open cut because we would have to install sheet pile. We're looking at that now because we're kind of teetering. We could do open cut without sheet pile, standard trench box, and so we've got to just make that call. But we're trying our best to stay away from sheet pile by all means possible.
And the votes on that block have votes on it?
Don't know about that, Jennifer. But we do want to coordinate with the residents, and glad you're here, and we want to let you know what's coming, and we're doing everything we can to minimize the impacts. And if there's suggestions, we want to hear that. We want to incorporate that as best as possible. And with these projects, the other aspect of them that I haven't mentioned is trying to build these with a complete streets aspect, I guess. If you can put in sidewalk, enhance curb and gutter, build bike paths, bike-friendly roadways. We're also looking at water quality. We want to improve water quality in this area, draining out to the Casey Canal. So how can we do that? Is by bioretention. We've done a study on that, a concept study on that. We can do bioretention bump outs, which also provide traffic calming, which is a big concern I know in this neighborhood. We can also put in pervious pavers. So there's different aspects of that we're planning to try to put in where they will fit, where they're acceptable to the residents, and where they can provide the biggest bang for that buck.
Who's doing the design for phase 2-1 and 2-2?
CHA is doing our design. Any other questions? Heath, you want to wrap up, or is there anything I missed, or?
I just want to say a couple things. I think, thank you, Zach.
I do want, we're
Yeah,
going to be
we're gonna-
here,
yeah, we're
and
gonna turn
we
it
can
on,
break out, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I know everybody might not want to ask their questions out loud, and so I wanted to make sure we have the opportunity to kind of do breakout sessions. You have 3 easels in the front and 3 in the back. So I do want to give everybody that opportunity. Staff will be hanging around for a few more minutes. But I do want to close with this. I started this conversation about technology. And I think what you've heard today is certainly a different concept that invokes technology to get at the same thing that we all started out trying to do. Many a moon before me, there was this conversation that we were having about the improvements that were needed and how best to do those. What you heard from Zach is we're going to use technology to try to do it in a more efficient way, a better way. Use the technology that we have today that they didn't know about 10, 15 years ago. And so, again, I don't want anybody to take it as a new concept. It's just a refreshed version of a concept that really gets at those purple areas. And when you get up and you walk around, I want you to look at all the various phases, and I really want you to focus on those purple areas, those 100-year flood areas, because that's what we're trying to target. That's where the flooding is, and we want to make sure that this work, this project, really gets after those areas, really improves it for those residents that, quite candidly, have been asking for that relief. And I think what you have before you is a way to do that, a way that's slightly different than maybe we talked about 10 years ago, but certainly a way that achieves the goal that we're all after. And so with that, I'm going to ask everybody just to hang around and kind of grab some staff. I know these two guys, you can ask them anything you want to. This guy right here, anything about deep boring, just don't let him say Charleston one more time. I don't want to hear about Charleston. Like if I hear Charleston one more time, I'm going to like have a fit. And Zach and Jan too, they can certainly answer any questions. So in closing, I do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. It is certainly an important thing when you guys come out. It's also important for us to be able to tell our story. This is not the last time we will tell this story. But this is a story worth telling, and I'd be remiss, he's going to hate that I do this, but I do want to thank Alderman Palumbo just for his support. You know, he got up here and he talked a lot about his team and my team, but I do appreciate the support in his district. We couldn't do this without that support. That support gives me the confidence that not only do we have the funding, which is a big deal for me, but we also have the district support, understanding that this will not be an easy project. It will not be an easy project, but what it will be is a delivery, a promise delivered many years later than it should have been. So I close with that, a promise delivered many years later than it should have been. And that's what I think we're gonna bring to the residents. So again, thank you all for coming. Really good to see everybody. Please stick around and grab one of our staff members and really try to understand this concept. So again, thank you everybody. You guys have a great night.